I'm not really sure what to title this video. It's actually a few different thoughts in one, and I believe this is going to go somewhere. But let's just start at the beginning and we'll see where we land. So, right now, I'm kind of going through my inventory of miniatures and miniature games that I have, trying to clear up some space so that maybe I can start on a new and exciting project. And unfortunately, that has proven to be very difficult. But going through my collection, I see right now that the lowest priority game that I have the most miniatures for, unfortunately, is the Batman miniatures game. This makes me sad because I really do enjoy the Batman miniatures game. I would say it was one of my favorite games back in the day. And this video isn't going to be about the how or why that game is dying or near dead in my eyes. It's more about really what I really like about that game and why I miss it. But I promise you, this will head towards the other game system that I plan on talking about. Because these two games are similar in ways that may not be totally apparent at first, but they are similar and they fill a similar niche with me. And at one point, I could honestly say that I preferred the Batman miniatures game over Malifaux, or I should say Malifaux 3rd edition. And today I find myself kind of on the opposite side of that equation. But, if I had my druthers, it would be that each game inherited something great from the other game. Now, as far as the Batman miniatures game, what it could have inherited or learned from Malifaux, that's pretty simple. Really, just wish that the Batman miniatures game had a more stable producer, at least along the scale of Weird Miniatures. And I know Weird is still an independent manufacturer and sometimes is difficult, has its own challenges, but not to date, not the scale that Night Models has had with the Batman miniatures game. Again, I'm going to try not to get into that, but yeah, if BMG could inherit anything from Malifaux, it would be to have a more stable producer of the game, and secondly, to produce in hard plastic, which we know that's not going to happen. In fact, Night Models BMG has moved to an STL print format, which is actually good in some ways, but not great for retail and growth here in the United States. But yeah, that's what BMG could learn from Malifaux. Now, on the opposite side, Malifaux could learn something from BMG, and that's kind of the main subject of this particular video. So, what really Malifaux and BMG have in common, at least in terms of their settings, is that they are both heavily character-driven settings, right? So in Malifaux, you control a Malifaux master and their crew, and the playstyle of the crew is very dependent on the selection of the master and the keyword that you run. Very similar to Batman miniatures game. You play a leader who tends to be one of the more main characters in the Batman universe, and then you assemble a crew designed to function around that particular character. So both of these games were really exciting for me in that way, that they're character driven, and that the idea is that you're going to pick a main-ish character to play and the crew that supports that character. But from a game mechanic standpoint, they approach these from two sort of different philosophies. So for Malifaux, the way the character playstyle is expressed has to do with the keyword selection itself and things like the rules that apply to all members of that crew that share the keyword. So this is typically the card that you get when you have selected your master and the associated keyword. So you'll get abilities that enhance that keyword, that and the master themselves has a number of abilities to kind of accentuate and portray what that particular crew and keyword is supposed to be on in game. And in previous editions of Malifaux, you would have schemes that you choose that you feel, typically from a pool, And you would choose these schemes based on your feeling of what you believe that crew and the playstyle would be most easy for them to complete. And even in the first edition of Malifaux, to take it a step further, you had faction specific schemes and even master specific schemes in some cases. But ultimately, that playstyle was expressed on the crew cards and the abilities of the crew themselves. The Batman miniature game took a different approach to expressing how particular leaders and their crews ran. And some of it has to do with the fact that in BMG, you have typically a boss who often has supernatural powers or extraordinary abilities, but their crew, their goons, are really just sort of average thugs for the most part. They're, whether we're talking about the standard Two-Face gangster, or if you're talking about a Gotham City policeman, they're basically all standard humans. So it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense design-wise to have these super unique thugs running around. Whereas in Malifaux, virtually every minion or hire that you have can have a unique set of abilities and a unique set of rules. And yet for Batman, they were really able to portray a leader and their playstyle expressed on the game board in a very narrative, very thematic way. This had to do with the unique mechanics of the Batman miniatures game objective deck, which was so innovative at the time 3rd edition BMG came out, and I feel like it had influence on some of the more modern games today. Let me explain what this system is for those of you who don't play BMG. So for BMG, when you select a particular crew, like if you're going to play Two-Face, or if you're going to play Joker, or if you're going to play like Birds of Prey or something like that, you would select that crew, and then you would also have access to a specific objective deck for that crew. So you'd have the crew specific objective deck, and then you'd have generic objectives that you can kind of sprinkle in to kind of help tailor the playstyle a little bit. But this objective deck, for the most part, was personalized for the crew, and then you could even do a little bit of tweaking to it yourself, like I mentioned, with generic cards. And what was so brilliant about this was the objectives and the deck itself served two functions. The top half of each card was an objective that your crew was trying to achieve, and you would score a commensurate amount of points based on what was assigned, the assigned victory point value of that card. While the bottom half of the card was a resource that would give you the ability to do something in game. So during the game, you would have a hand of objective cards instead of a hand of fate cards like you do in Malifaux. So imagine in Malifaux, you have, and this is what's so cool in 4th edition Malifaux, is you have scheme cards that you would select and then move on to the next scheme and try to achieve that scheme. Well, guess what? That's very similar to how the Batman miniatures game works, except for BMG, you have a deck of, if I recall, something like 30 cards, as opposed to the much more limited amount that you have in Malifaux. Malifaux, you're trying to achieve, typically like 3 schemes through the game. Now you can tree through them and string them together, and that's super fun, and it's what I really enjoy about 4th edition. However, Batman miniatures game takes this to another level. You're going to achieve a typical game of Batman. You're going to achieve somewhere between 15 and say 25 of those different objective cards. And what's so cool about that is that this leads to a very customized playstyle for crews that, at least physically, there wouldn't be significant differences, right? Like there's not going to be a significant difference between the human gangers that are in Penguin's crew as they would be in Two-Face's crew. However, these crews are going to be looking to achieve different things on the board, and they may have different access to different abilities and resources as defined by their leader. And this is one of my favorite absolute things about the Batman miniature game, right? So, for example, when I was playing Riddler, I knew that my objective deck lent to that whole playstyle of Riddler being enigmatic, of playing mind games with their opponent, of trying to keep their opponent second guessing what they were trying to achieve. And the deck of objectives really worked so well to give that feeling in game. Similarly, when I switched to Penguin, even though my goons and Riddler's goons are going to be very similar, with Penguin and the objective deck, you play through this narrative. Like when I was playing Penguin, I felt like I control the board. Like that other player that's against me is playing on my board. He's playing in my city, and I'm going to allow him to do specific things as long as that keeps business flowing for me, and I continue to have a stronger overall influence in the game. And to adopt that mindset and play into that narrative is what made BMG such a fun game for me, and still ranks among one of my favorite games that I've played. Now, a fair criticism of BMG is that some of the playstyles and some of the objectives were sort of non-interactive with the opponent. And that's pretty valid, especially if you're playing a crew like Riddler. Like at one point, I had a Riddler deck that I could nearly complete with the opponent not doing a whole lot to interact with me. I can just continue to score and try to force him to play my game. And so I can see where critics of the game were saying, okay, well, some of these playstyles aren't very interactive. I don't think the game is that great, where Malifaux really, with their objective system, pitches you head to head. And so you do have that struggle, you do have that push and pull, and that tension that you do expect from a skirmish game. But I do feel I think these games could really benefit from each other, and I do feel like Malifaux 4th could do something like that, where the schemes are a little bit more customizable, or the strategies are a bit more customizable. I'm not going to try to do that on the fly here, but it's a thought worth entertaining, in my opinion. I love that in Malifaux, I can play Rasputina or Karis or Colette like I could back in the day, and I'm very familiar with their characters. And again, it's a similar draw that I have with BMG, but I feel like with BMG, I just get to actually feel like I am participating in their role in Gotham City. And I think with Malifaux, you have the ability to do that with just some tweaks to the board to really make it feel like, okay, well, why are the Nephilim fighting the Bayou in this particular game? Why is Zoraida involved? Why is Hoffman facing off against the Explorers? And I love all of that. And yes, you can write your fluff around that, and you can even make narrative leagues or campaigns. But I think the game actually has some design space to allow for it to happen sort of more organically on the tabletop. And I do think that that's where BMG really shines. BMG also has some other neat little innovations to speed up the game. But again, I would definitely say that both of these systems are not without their flaws. And I just think it's really interesting that each game could really benefit from the learnings of the other company and or the other game design. So I'm going to kind of leave this ramble here in that thought there that, hey, that would be interesting. Just give a little bit of more narrative flow to the way schemes work in Malifaux. And I think that this is such a brilliant game, and would really lend to the overall experience of playing a more immersive game, and not necessarily so tied up with the specific mechanics themselves. So anyways, that's my rambling thought on BMG. Rest in sorta peace, BMG, and Malifaux 4th Edition. Let's play more 4th Edition. Let me know in the comments what you think, and if you want, we can talk a little bit more about either one of these game systems.